What's up guys, Prox here and welcome back to another video. Today it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be an interesting video. It's gonna be a lot of talking though. I'm not gonna show too much in 3ds Max. I'm gonna be talking, of course I'm gonna show stuff in 3ds Max, but it's gonna be a lot of talking, explanation. It's gonna be an introduction video to Iray, the renderer that comes with 3ds Max 2013 in this example, that can utilize your GPU, your graphics card, if you have a NVIDIA CUDA enabled GPU. Now I'm going to be talking a lot about that, what kinds of graphic card I would recommend for this, and also explanations as to why you can't use other graphics cards and so on and so forth. So if you're looking for, to create something real fast and snappy, look at the next video after this. I'm going to be explaining a lot more into detail then. Now, if you've learned about Mental Ray and you learned studio renders like this, I think I've shown a little bit about studio renders on my channel. I'm not sure, I can't. If not, I'll probably show some studio renders with Mental Ray, but it takes a lot of tweaking with the global illumination in Mental Ray, and there's a lot of settings that you have to set, and you have to get everything right, and the lights and everything has to be perfect in order for it to look like remotely realistic. As you can see in the background here, this was rendered with Iray. I used Iray to render this, and it didn't take long at all to set up the materials or the lighting or anything. It just works. That's the cool thing about Iray. Now, it's not good for everything. That's the problem with Iray right now. If there is a problem, it's the thing that it's a little bit underdeveloped. It's very new. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of Mental Ray, and it's not very great for non-photorealistic renders. Okay, but with some tweaking you can get some pretty nice results, but you don't have to do too much tweaking because there's not that many options. Now, if you look at the background here that I've rendered, this is a Razer Black Shark headset that I figured I would model just for fun. And I actually sent it to Razer, and they were really impressed, and gave me sent me a little gift in the mail from it. But as you can see, I have depth of field and some shiny reflections on the materials, and it's you would think that this would take a long time to render, but the thing with Iray is that it doesn't really get affected all that much by stuff like depth of field and aliasing. And the best way I can explain Iray is like you're taking a photo with a really, really bad camera. Because at first it's really grainy. We'll get into it later. We'll get into 3ds Max. But I'm going to show you a list of stuff you need to get before you get into Iray. But it gets really grainy at first, and then it gets less and less grainy, as if you had a camera that was really bad and you had to expose it for a long time. So you can choose how long you want it to render, and when you're satisfied with the graininess, when it's as little grainy as you want it, when it's as smooth as you want it, you just cancel the render and you save your render. Alright, so first of all, before we get into Iray, I want to show you some links of stuff that you need. Well, you don't need it, but I recommend you get it. Alright, so first of all, go to jeffpatton.net. His site, his blog right here is perfect for people who are interested in Iray. He is, I'm not sure, I think he's a developer with Iray, I'm not sure, but he is a professional materials and lighting 3D artist. He doesn't do that much modeling and stuff. A lot of his models is not created by him, but he does lighting and materials rendering super great. He mostly does cars and stuff like that, but you can learn a lot from him. But at least I'm gonna show these links in the description or on the screen, so you can probably just click on a screen and it'll take you here. I'm not sure how I'll do it yet, but go here to this link right here and download the Iray layered material. You're gonna need this for the other video. However, I want you to, this is the introduction, I want you to get it ready and get it now. Next, after that, I want you to get the Iray Manager script that he created and just downloaded it, and you can thank him in the comments for the script. It's not necessary, but it's very useful. It's very useful. It makes stuff a lot easier with Iray. So get these two things, and you're gonna have to have 3ds Max 2013, because that has all the new features of Iray, and the 2014 version is out while making this video, but the 2014 has a bunch of issues with Kepler and it doesn't render well. As the making of this video, they probably fixed it, you know, when somebody else watches this. So, but for now, 2013, it doesn't work with 2014. With my graphics card, at least with the Kepler. It may work with Fermi, but I'm not sure. But Kepler had some issues there. All right. So once you have 3ds Max and you've installed your plugin and then you installed your material, you can go into 3ds Max. We probably should open a new scene here. Just gonna reset it. And you want to press F10 on your keyboard, or go to the render setup tab, and you want to go into the comments tab, scroll all the way down, click on assign renderer, click on this box right here that says that is next to production, and choose well, depending on what you have, it'll probably say Mental Ray or the default scanline renderer already, but choose NVIDIA Iray. Alright. So now that that's all set up, you can see there's almost no options up here. There's only common and renderer. And in common there's all the, well, that's all the common settings. That's for all the renderers. It's just basic 3ds Max renderer. If you want to render a single frame, you know, animations, what kind of view you want to render. Usually it's set to view, that means it renders the entire output size. All these kind of options that are standard. Get a nice resolution that you like to render in. 720p will be nice, since I'm only recording in 1080p, because somebody was complaining about too high resolutions when I was doing 1440p. But I guess if people watch these on their laptops, or people have, not everybody has a big monitor, but that is something that I recommend you get. And I'm not sure if I'm going to jump right into the renderer straight away. Might want to explain a couple of things about hardware. Yeah, let's do that. So the guys that make these, makes this renderer is it's NVIDIA. Well, it's a division of NVIDIA. First of all, the Iray renderer was independent of NVIDIA, and NVIDIA bought them up, and they were a part of Mental Images that makes Mental Ray. But now NVIDIA purchased both of those, and they continued their development to work with their GPU only. That means you have to have an well, you don't have to. Iray works with your CPU, but it only works with an NVIDIA GPU, meaning a NVIDIA graphics card that is CUDA enabled. That means that it has the stream processing technology of NVIDIA's CUDA. And it does not work with AMD FirePro cards or any AMD card, unfortunately, but that's just the way that is the biggest reason, probably the biggest reason that I chose NVIDIA card when I decided to build my computer. Because if you look at it number for number, in performance per price and all of that stuff, a lot of the AMD cards actually beat the NVIDIA cards in performance for some games, but if you have multiple cards, their crossfire drivers are horrible. All right, so first of all, you want to get an NVIDIA card. Now, secondly, if you have two NVIDIA cards like me and you're going to use Iray, you want to disable SLI. That's the first thing you want to do. It does work with SLI, but it works, the performance is worse. I've tested it many times. It's about 40% more performance if you disable SLI. I don't know why it works like this, but that's just the way it works for Iray. This is not a video game; it's a rendering engine. It uses, instead of using its like processing power to synchronize the two GPUs, it uses all the computing power for what it's needed. Now, I'm not going to use both my cards in this because I'm using one for recording, and I'm using some cores on my CPU for recording and running the software and 3ds Max and stuff like that. All right, so let's jump right into the render here. So in the first parameter, this is basically kind of your quality setting, if you will. You can either set it to time. You basically set it, for example, to 1 minute, 2 minutes, or 3 minutes, or whatever you feel that you need to get the result that you want. Or you can set it to number of iterations, how many passes it's going to go over your frame, basically. 1 minute and 500 passes, these have no correlation. Like 1 minute, if you have a really fast computer, if you have a lot of graphics cards, like 4 or something like that, it could be 10,000 iterations. But if you only have 1 or 2, 500 iterations could take you a minute. It could take you longer. And I often just set it to unlimited. And then when I'm happy with the result, I'll just click cancel. All right. So this is your quality settings, basically. And if we go into the advanced parameters, this is kind of like your indirect illumination settings. And it says advanced parameters, but really there's nothing advanced here at all. There are 2 settings for quality. And I usually just set it to physically correct, unlimited. It basically takes a light, if you have a light source in your scene, and it calculates it as if it was a real light in the real world and sends out exactly the amount of photons that it would in the real world. And it's based on size and illumination. So if you have a large light, area light, Iray is great with area lights and glowing objects. Like self-illuminating materials in Mental Ray is horrible compared to Iray. Iray, you might as well use a sphere with a self-illuminated material on as if you would use a free light. They work exactly the same way. It's incredible. I've used the limiter once. It just makes it look weird. So I always use physically correct, unless I need a really fast pass. But then it's better to just like drop the resolution. Is what I feel. So physically correct. Now image filtering, anti-aliasing. This is basically just a regular setting. It doesn't. There's no setting for how many times it's gonna alias your image, because really it doesn't. It doesn't. All this does is that it looks at edges like jaggies and stuff, and it filters a clusters of 3x3, for example, for Gauss or for box, or whichever you choose. I choose Gauss because it's a little softer. Box is faster. Triangle, I would use triangle. But so, and displacement, this is just a regular settings for displacement. Bump maps don't really work in Iray. Iray only uses physical maps. Meaning if you want to change the surface, like change the surface so the shading gets different on a model, you have to use displacement maps. You can use bump maps for like reflectivity and stuff, meaning that you can make a, how do I explain this? You can make if you have a sparkly surface, the entire surface might look a little bumped, but really isn't. It's only this. It's only the surface that's bumped. It's weird to explain. I'll get into that, and when I get into the materials, in the next video. So this is basically just a displacement settings. It sets how many subdivisions you want to make for displacements. Don't worry about this right now. Material override. I don't know what this does. So just ignore that. Now this part is a little important. Here it'll show up Let's leave the chopper. I don't know if you can hear that, but there was a chopper passing right over my house. Of course, when I'm recording, that's always great. And yeah, here it shows up all the graphics cards that you have. I have two in mine, and it always tells you which one is used by Windows. Windows doesn't use SLI, so I'm going to use one of my graphics cards for rendering, and I'm going to use 8 cores. I have 12 cores. Well, I have a 6 core with hyperthreading that turns out to 12. So I use 8 of them for rendering, and I use 4 of them for the operating system, recording with Bandicam, and so I can show you this stuff. And this is really cool. It's just, it's so easy. You just enable motion blur, and you set like, just like a camera, just like a regular DSLR camera, you set the speed of the shutters and you get motion blur. Of course the object has to be moving, and you get just motion blur, and it doesn't affect your render time at all. It's amazing how it doesn't affect your render time. There's no difference if you have motion blur on or off. It's not like a filter in Mental Ray where depth of field or motion blur or glow or stuff like that will take a lot of your render time. There will be no effect. It'll just be as if you didn't have it. It's amazing. All right, so we've actually gone through the entire NVIDIA Iray settings panel right here in just a few minutes, and if we would go into Mental Ray, we would be sitting here for hours. Now I want to show you this plugin right here. This is the Iray Manager that I told you to download. It basically does the same thing, except you get to choose a little bit more settings. Here it says that it's set to everything, but that's kind of weird. And this is for the matte objects. I don't have the matte material engaged, so I can show you that right now. This is really useful. You can override your background color. Say you had backgrounds. Let's say you had a background and you had an environment map and it doesn't show up in Iray. That's because Iray only renders physically correct stuff. And a lot of the maps in 3ds Max are shader based. Iray cannot render shaders at all. It just doesn't get it. It's got to be physically correct, or else it'll render gray. If something's gray and you didn't want it to be gray, it's because it's just a shader and it doesn't understand it. So it renders it as a gray flat material. And you have the environment blur settings right here. And that was a pain to get into Mental Ray, but here is just a checkbox. Super easy. Use map if you want to have a background map for a high dynamic range imagery or something like that. It's super awesome. And here you can save all the settings if you want. I haven't saved these settings because I just reset the scene. But if you set some settings and you want to save them, you can just save them here, or you can load them in, and you can click render right here. All right. So that's a lot on the settings. Let's open up the scene again. And as you can see, it's a really simple scene. I have a skylight. I have a seamless backdrop. I have a area light, which is just a free light. It's a disk. And I have my model. And let me show you how this works. So we'll get a resolution that's usable, and we'll hit render. First it bakes the environment, if you have an environment map. If you don't have an environment map, it won't bake the environment, it'll just render straight away. And just straight off the bat, you can see how easily it calculates everything. Of course, since I'm only using one graphics card and like half my cores, it'll take a lot longer time. But as you can see in the first part, it was a little grainy, like super grainy. Now it's pretty grainy, but it gets better and better and better and better and better the longer it renders, because now it's set to unlimited, and it'll just render forever until you have the quality you want. And if you are happy with it, you click cancel. It'll take some time and it'll save your image, and then you can save your image to whatever folder you want. Or you can set it to a time pass for example, we can set it to, I don't want to render a minute here. Let's render 30 seconds. And it'll estimate your render time. First it'll translate, bakes the environment, and then the time starts, and it'll render for 30 seconds. So if you're doing an animation, let's say you're doing an animation, and you've tested, you've seen how long it takes for you to get the result that you want, then you have to set it to time. So you set the time, let's say the time to get your result was and like 20 minutes per frame. Let's say it's in a really advanced scene. And you set it to 20 minutes per frame. And then you set your time output to active segment, and you choose the active segment that you want to render, and you just hit render, and every time it hits 20 minutes, it'll start rendering the next, and it'll start rendering the next, and it'll do that until the animation is complete. So it works for animation as well. It's really cool. Or you can set it to iterations, which basically, for example, 200 iterations, and I want to render. And that means it'll go over the scene 200 times before it says it's ready. This is also a way of doing it instead of minutes. It's basically the same thing, but it can be a little bit more accurate. Depending on what's in your scene, depending on materials. Materials do affect Iray render times. That's something that I can say. That's the only thing. Materials and polygons basically is what affects it. Lights. How big are your lights? How many lights do you have? General 3D ideologies. See here? Some of the iterations now at the end here will take longer. So if you wanted it to only take 20 minutes, and you set it to an iteration instead, the later iterations takes a lot longer than the first ones. So it'll be longer and longer and longer. Alright, we're just going to cancel it there. You can always cancel. No matter which one of these you have, you can always just cancel. Oh, I'm happy with it. I'll take that. And now we get an airplane crossing our house. Super traffic moment right here. I hope you can hear me over it. I'm not sure. So this was an introduction video, and I'm not sure how I wanted to explain all of this, and if it's really gonna be any help to anybody. Really, it feels kind of useless, but it's a way of showing you what Iray does really. And maybe I should probably just reset and just make a quick scene so you can see how easy it is. Alright, so I'll just make a plane right here and turn off the brackets, convert it to an editable polygon, and we'll make a seamless backdrop. Chamfer it, give it some size, smooth, auto smooth, collapse the stack, and snaps turn on. Make a camera like so. Oh, what kind of camera do we want? 50 mil seems nice. I guess I'll show you a little bit about the lights and stuff, but I really want to leave that for another video. Yeah. Save frames. Get a resolution that I like. Rejig the camera. Rejigging the camera. Come on, man. This is too narrow. So I'm just gonna scale it out. There, easy. Alright, so what do we want to render? Let's make the famous of famousness. The teapot, of course. What else? I mean, there's no other reason to make anything else. It's just teapots are awesome. It's a little big. Let's make it smaller. And I don't like the camera looking that way. Bring it down a little lower. I guess I can show you depth of field in the same video actually. Oh, I should probably instance these. Like so. Like so. And if that one's going to be in focus, change the planar view. Move the camera back a little to the side perhaps? No. Change this to realistic. Oh, the ground plane isn't long enough. There we go. And get out of vertex mode. There we go. Increase the segments because we want them to be smooth. Yeah, 17. That's good. Now, do I have Iray enabled? Yeah, Iray is enabled. We're going to set it to unlimited. We don't have any lights in the scene right now. This is just standard as it gets. As you can see, if you don't have any lights in the scene, Iray will use the standard lights in the scene. Just like that. And as you can see, it renders beautifully. It renders super fast. And I don't have any materials on now. No materials on yet. But we can add, for example, a light. Or, even better, we're not going to add a light. We're going to create a sphere. Like so. Move it up. Choose position that I like. And oh my god, I guess my computer doesn't like 1080p, huh? I don't like 1080p. But you guys do, and I don't get why. Now the thing about Iray, when you've chosen Iray, when you've installed your material, here's the Iray material, for example. There is another material, which is the layered one. I'm not sure where that is. It's down here somewhere. Here? No, whatever. You can use the Arch and Design materials in Iray, but it'll cancel out some of the features. Some of the features won't work. With the Iray material, every feature will work, of course, because it's created for Iray. But I'm not sure, does Iray have self-illumination? No, it doesn't have self-illumination, but you don't need it. But in order to create a light with self-illumination, you just set the color to white. And you set the reflectivity to 0. Glossiness can be whatever, because we don't care. And you go down here to self-illumination, hit self-illumination. It just says glow. And set your white point to what the white of the scene is. 6500 is the standard white point. Set the lights to something you like. 5000, that's a little much, perhaps. Set it to 3000 first. Depends on how large your object is. And you can apply it. Now the thing is that if you turn on the illuminate with scene lights, it doesn't react because it doesn't recognize this as a light. The real-time render doesn't recognize it as a light. But Iray does. Or does it? No, it does not. Now, of course, yeah, you have to have a light in your scene. What was I thinking? You have to have a light in your scene or else it doesn't know. So you can just create a free light and oh my god, and it'll create a light, but you can turn it off. Just turn it off and render. And of course the exposure value is completely off, so you have to press 8 and set it to, for example, indoor daylight. That's the standard of 10, which is a little dark. And the many ways we can change that. We can either change the exposure value, or we can up the light to 5000, which I should have set it to 2 first. And we're gonna create multiple lights. Why not, right? Why not? And we can also turn on enable depth of field, like straight away. And it doesn't seem to affect it. We're gonna say 0.2. Is that too blurry? We'll see. Yeah, that's super blurry. It's not what we want. Set it to 0.5. Depends on how big your scene is, all of this, the camera. But it's all physically based, so you're never gonna get any weird results. Well, that's super blurry, but still. As you can see, even with, I don't have any lights. Well, I have a light in the scene just to tell the render engine to look for lights. It doesn't look, if you don't have a light in your scene, it doesn't look for lights. But you can just put a light in your scene and turn it off, and it'll render with the light coming off the object. Really, which is so cool. And I'll get into a lot more Iray stuff later, I'm sure. But for now, I think I'm gonna leave it with that. I hope this sort of introduced you to Iray. Or, well, I'm not sure. Did it teach you much or stuff like that? But I hope you at least got an introduction. You know, you kind of understand what Iray does. It uses your GPU, your graphics card. It also uses your processor, but it uses your graphics card to really calculate physical based renders. Alright, so in the next video I'll probably go over in more detail. So that's the one you want to be looking for if you want quick results. I'll go over in more detail. I'll explain how all the lights work, when you want to use which lights, like when you want to use lights like these, when you want to use lights that are objects, when you want to use what kind of materials, you know, how to set up the Iray materials, how it's different from, for example, here is a bunch of Iray materials, how it's different from the mental ray materials, and what kind of mental ray materials and what kind of effects you can use in mental ray and stuff like that. I think I'm gonna explain that in the next video. Can't really think of anything else that I want to say in an introduction. So except for thank you guys for watching. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.